Well, good morning. Good morning, guys. This is Vinney Chopra. Some of you know me. I come live to you. Well, not live through podcast on Apartment Syndication Made Easy. That's the book I wrote a couple of years back and got great reviews. And I started doing the webinars and also the podcast to bring the top professionals, into this channel. So if you like, today we're going to talk about syndication. We're going to talk about PPMs. We're going to talk about new things happening for accredited investors and how you could really invest in different things in real estate, actually. And you could invest outside too. And my good friend is back, Nick Mcgrew, who's welcome back, Nick. I know you have been on the show before also. I would love to kind of, share with you that, Nick received his Juris Doctorate degree from Pepperdine University School of Law. At Pepperdine, Nick's focus his studies on business, entrepreneurship, and real estate, and took classes from the world-renowned Stratus Institute of Dispute Resolution, as well as Jeffrey A. Palmer Center. I'm sure you will kind of explain all that, right? And not only that, I was so fascinated, Nick, you not only have the judicial, into the law, but you're also taxation.
Yes, I do have
You
my
got a
LLM with that.
combination of two, which is amazing, combination. And Nick is the owner and founder of Polymath Legal, which is a wonderful boutique company. And I've been working with Nick, many of you probably know in my circle and so on, and where he handles transactional matters in the areas of real estate and business. He holds active bar licenses both in California and Washington State, and also holds California real estate broker's license. You got everything here, Nick. Welcome back. Welcome
Thank
back.
you.
Yeah.
Always good to be back. Always great to talk with you and to see you.
No, I'm so excited. So tell us a little bit more about some new developments happening in the SEC, regulations and things and so on. I know accredited investors language kind of changed just recently, and what might be coming also with paying to raise money. I'm really looking into. I know I've read about it and heard about it quite a bit, but where all these new changes are going and what's your opinion about them and so on. Hey guys, this is some episode you don't want to miss. And please share, like, comment, and share this episode with all your circle of friends. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, there are lots of breakthroughs kind of coming through the SEC, which overall I think are pretty good. I think that and even they've kind of commented when they're, making their recommendations, is
Yeah.
they said, look, how we've been doing things, it keeps a lot of people out of the ability to raise capital for their ventures just because the rules as they were set up and still kind of are set up are for more larger enterprises oftentimes, or more institutional type situations. And so thankfully they seem to be aware that, yeah, these rules that we have, they work for some levels, but they're keeping a lot of people out of the game. And so in the last couple of months, we've seen at least in my opinion, a couple of good breakthroughs that kind of make it a bit easier or open up the ability for people to get funding for their projects. So you mentioned one about the accredited investors. Now, this
Yes.
is one that I will say wasn't quite as groundbreaking as we would have liked to see. Now, with that, the SEC themselves said, look, we realize that we are expanding this definition, but we also realize that it's probably not going to affect most people in the grand scheme of things. But yes, recently they did expand the definition of accredited investor. Some of the expansions include they create a spousal equivalent. So when we're looking for, if we're trying to qualify based upon income, there's a limit for individuals and then a limit for spouses. And so they added spousal equivalents. So essentially people that if they're not necessarily married, but they are a spousal equivalent,
Yes.
they can pull their funds together to qualify as well.
Sure.
They also added Native American tribes. And
Mm-hmm.
so Native American tribes, certain how they're set up, they would be able to fit as accredited investors. There were some rules that made it a bit easier for family offices. And again, though, with the family office change, it
Mm.
was for the individuals of that family office. So not a whole lot of
Mhm.
helping the common man, so to speak.
Mhm.
One that I think will open it up at least a bit, and I think it's good because it'll allow employees to get involved, is that one of the other new expansions is that they will allow a knowledgeable employee of a private fund to also be considered an accredited
Credit
investor.
investors, I
So
see.
essentially, if there's an employee of a private fund and they have some decision making authority, and again, it's a new law, so we haven't had a lot of interpretations yet.
Mhm.
So we'll probably be learning in the next months, years, exactly what a knowledgeable employee is.
Yeah.
But assuming they fit the definition of knowledgeable employee, then they could be considered an accredited investor as well. And so those were some of the expansions. And like I mentioned, as you saw, if you're not Native American, if you don't have a family office, if you're
Yeah.
not working, if you're not an eligible employee, probably not going to do
Yeah.
anything for you at
In the same
all.
place. Yeah.
But at least I like the direction they're going, because at least it shows they're saying, okay, you know what, we have these rules here, and they're not necessarily working the best or working for everybody. So let's see what we can do to try to make come up with some better ways to resolve these things.
So true. I was going to, I didn't do the research, but like how many accredited investors, individuals are there in USA? Any kind of number?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. I unfortunately don't have an idea about that.
Surely, I know a lot of sophisticated investors or non-accredited investors out there, of course, and again, they have to be probably in the, those who can really invest also, not their whole life saving. One should never, ever, ever invest all your life, savings. You got to invest only small portion, of course, diversify. We are not CPAs or I'm not attorney or anything. I'm just saying that, in my situation, I mean, my wife and I, we are very conservative people, and we feel like, we need to be just investing a little bit, that if it's tied up for 4 or 5 years, holy cow, that you don't need it, for emergency funds and things like that. So
Yeah.
did I hear from somebody that we should do series something? I don't know what it was. They said if you want to do any course for getting to be qualified to be accredited investors without a minimum like $1 million net worth, not counting your equity in the house primary residence, or making 200 or 300,000 for the family, you could do some series course. What was that?
Yes, very good point. I actually left that out. So that's was one of the other expansions to where essentially, if you're a licensed investment advisor or broker dealer, you might be qualified as an accredited investor as well. So if you've heard of, I forget the exact series it applies to, but it's some of the
Sure.
license like a Series 6 and Series
Series
63.
6 is the number. It was in my mind too. But
Yeah.
please, everybody, do your own research. But looks like that might be the one, right?
Yeah, so those are essentially people that are already selling securities. They're licensed to sell
I see.
securities to individuals and get commissions. And so
Uh-huh.
to me, again, it makes sense. It's like if we're going to allow them to sell and make money
Yeah.
and tell other people how this investment is so good and they should do it, they at least have the knowledge to should have the knowledge to understand and be able to determine if it's a good one for themselves as well. And if we think about it, that's a big part of what the SEC is trying to do. They're trying to protect the investor and consumer,
Yeah.
and even more so with a private offering, because with private offerings you don't have anywhere near the disclosure requirements that you
Yeah.
would with public. And
Sure.
so we have these rules for private offerings to try to make sure we're still protecting the investors. Someone who's holding a series license, they should, through passing those
Yeah.
classes and taking all that education, should be able to figure out if this is a good investment for themselves. So
Totally.
yes, they also would have some new opportunities as well.
Excellent. And I think I really like that the SEC is the watchdog for the, on the side of the investors. And it's a very open field, very transparent field. And one should be totally giving every bit of information to the investors so that they can make the wisest decisions, because it's their hard earned money, Now let's talk about this other thing we've been thinking about or hearing, that people can get paid to raise money for some syndicators who want to raise money. So, what's what's going on in that arena? Yeah.
So I'll lead off with it. It's a potentially people can
Okay.
do the same. So I'll take a step back, and I think we mentioned it last time. I actually am a professor, so if I have my professor hat on and I'm too teachy, just let me know.
Yeah.
But how? So the SEC is an administrative agency, and so how they often create their laws or rules. One thing they do is called the notice and comment. And essentially, what that means is that they'll give you notice and say, "Hey, we're thinking about a new rule or thinking about changing how we handle certain things.
Yeah.
Here's our proposal." And so they give everybody notice of what their intended or proposed changes.
Yeah.
And then they also give people the ability to write in and say, "Yeah, I think that's great, but you should take it further." Or, "No, I think that's horrible. That's a bad idea." Or, "Yes, this is good. I love it. Keep going." And so they give notice about what their intended changes, and then they have a comment period to where people can chime in for good, bad, or in between.
Mhm.
And then they'll review all those comments. And once they've reviewed them, they might say, "You know, this is a bad idea. We're going to scrap it all together." Or they
Mhm.
might say, "Oh yeah, this is a good idea. People like it. Let's leave it exactly as it is." Or they might say, "Yes, this is a good idea, but the comments brought up some good issues, so maybe we're going to change our rule one way or another." So where we are with that right now is that the comment period has closed. And so
Oh,
now the SEC is just reviewing and going to figure out exactly what the final rule is going to be. The timeline on that, we don't really know. One thing to also keep in mind with a lot of these kind of developments with the SEC is that we have a new administration, which
yeah.
means we might have a new chairman or new leadership of the SEC. So that could change a lot of the pending things that we have going on.
Sure.
But right now, there is a proposed new rule for finders. And what it does is it actually creates essentially two tiers of finders that we can call somebody a finder. And if you fit in either one of those tiers and you're following the requirements, you actually can get a transaction-based payment or a commission, so to speak.
Mhm.
Right now, how the finder's fee works, it is pointless basically. I've had clients that they'll say, "Hey, can you write me a finder's fee agreement? Can we do this?" And I'll
Mhm.
explain the requirements. Right now, essentially for finders, you are paying them for the introduction only. And so
Only.
let's say I say, "Vinney, you know what? I've seen your projects. They're all great. I know some very high net worth people. I think they like your project. If I introduce them to you, will you give me a payment?"
Yeah.
So if we were to do that right now, you would have to pay me simply for the introduction. So when I
Just the
send that
introduction,
email,
set amount. It's not based on how much money they might invest. It's just the finder, one time only, right? That's what. Yeah.
exactly. So you and I would negotiate what that payment is. I
Yeah.
would send an email introduction to do a phone call, and then that check should be coming shortly after that,
I see.
even if the person ultimately does not invest.
Does not invest. Yeah.
And so for you, Vinny, you would say, "Why would I do that? Why am I going to pay him a couple $1,000 and
Yeah.
I might not even get any investment at all?" And so when I talk through this with clients, they're like, "Oh, this puts me at quite a bit of risk. I'm paying somebody
Mhm.
just for a contact that might ultimately fall flat and lead to nothing." And
Sure.
so the finder's fee setup right now just doesn't make sense for most people. It puts the company or the person trying to acquire the capital, it puts them at a good amount of risk because they're paying money for the
Sure.
potential to get capital, but no guarantee at all.
Right.
And so what the proposed rule would do is that it would actually allow it to be more of a true commission type of payment.
I see.
With that though, there, and again, this is proposed, so nothing is final. As I mentioned, everything that I'm about to say might change in the final rule. But what
Right.
they propose right now is that first, you can't be a bad actor. So if the SEC has said
Correct.
you can't raise or can't head a company or something like that, this doesn't apply to you. Also, this only applies to private offerings as well. So it's got to be a company that's private and not intending to go public at all.
Mhm.
So if you have that, oh, the other thing is that it's got to be accredited, or the potential investor, the finder has to believe that they are accredited as
I
well.
see. Okay.
And
Yes.
so if you fit all of these characteristics, and there's a few other ones as well, but if you fit them,
Mhm.
then you could fall under to be a tier one finder or a tier two finder. The general difference between tier one and tier two is that tier one would be, let's say that I say, "Vinny, I'm going to be your finder." So I might be, not salaried, but we might have a periodic payment or some agreement to where this year I'm looking for you and you only, and I'm going to be bringing people to invest in just your deal.
I
If I
see.
do that and it's only you're the only one for a 12-month period, then I would fall under the tier one category.
I see.
Tier two would actually allow the finder to find investors for multiple operators,
I see.
but there are some more disclosures and some more requirements. Specifically, I know for sure with tier two, I'm not certain with tier one, but with tier two, there would definitely have to be a written agreement. We'd have to disclose what the payment amount is and when that's triggered and things like that as well.
Mm.
So those are the some of the highlights of the proposed rule, which again, as I mentioned at the top of this, I think it's a good direction that the SEC is going in, because I was always baffled about the finder's fee rule. Because I
Yes.
say this is a rule that doesn't help anybody. You have a rule
Yeah.
that says, hey, you can get a finder's fee, but then when you put so many parameters in there to where it makes it no sense, it's
Yeah.
like, why do we have this rule in the first place when in application it's not going to achieve much at all?
So true. No, thank you, Nick. You explained so nicely. I love that professorship. You teach, and you are able to bring it in so simple terms. I know anybody who would like to know more about that, please do look for Vinney Chopra, Nick Mcgrew, our previous episode, and we talk a lot about, the like raising money through fund of a fund. I know we spend a lot of time in that, which is a very good way and close, very sound way, to do fund of a fund, where the person who's raising money for you is the issuer. He's the issuer, and he's working with his own investors that he has built relationships with. That way, they are able to rely on that person or that issuer or syndicator, let's say, right? Yeah, yeah. But
Mhm.
let me ask you a question. What are some pitfalls, Nick, as a lot of people reach you to do PPMs? And how would you say the brand new people who want to do some private placement memorandum, operating agreement, and subscription agreement, what are some pitfalls and some fallacies that people go through?
Oh man, there are many. Let's see, where should we start? I'd say the first I'd start is maybe even a non-legal one. A lot of people don't realize I guess for lack of a better word, the cost, and I don't mean necessarily monetarily, but the
Mhm.
cost involved with running a fund. There's a lot of administrative work, a lot of reporting, a lot of
Yeah,
coordinating accountants, attorneys, administrators, that sort of thing. And
yeah.
so a lot of people don't realize how much work it is. They say, oh yeah, I know people that have money, they're interested. We can just get their check and we're good to go. And I say, nah, slow down a little bit. There's a lot more you got to do. Getting the check is kind of the first part, and then you've got to still service them throughout
Yes.
the rest of the deal. So a lot of people don't realize the extent of work that's involved after you've received the funds as well, or when you're taking them in. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that I would, if we're talking about things to be aware of or things to caution, that's one big thing that I see quite a bit. Um, I'd say some other ones, and this is why you have attorneys. But sometimes people are not fully aware of all the exemptions that are available,
Yeah.
and depending on what their business plan is and what their model is. I primarily focus on Regulation D, but there are numerous other exempt offerings as well.
Mhm.
And I guess if we're talking about developments in the SEC, another development is that I think this was just in the last probably 2 weeks or so,
Mhm.
it was approved to where the limits for a Regulation A offer as well as Regulation crowd fund have increased. So I forget the Regulation A increases off of the top of my head,
Mhm.
but Regulation crowd fund increased from 1,070,000 to I believe it's $5 million now.
I see.
And that's another example to where I thought, that because with Regulations crowd fund, it's an interesting exemption because you're not stuck in the accredited or sophisticated world. It
Yeah.
really does open it up to everybody.
Yeah.
But instead of having to be accredited or sophisticated, we just put investment limits based upon that individual investor's income.
Ah,
But it could be an attractive exemption because it does allow for some solicitation. It
mhm.
also does allow, as I mentioned, since you're not stuck with accredited or sophisticated, it allows a bigger pool of investors.
Yeah.
But when I would walk through this with clients, particularly with real estate, the cap of 1,070,000 was a problem because if you're, obviously you can find deals that are lower than that, but if you're syndicating, a lot of times you're looking at a deal that's a bit more substantial than that, and the capital raise you need would be higher. And
Yeah.
so while a lot of the other parameters were great, that 1,070,000 limit was prohibitive.
Mhm.
Now with the $5 million limit, that could start making sense
Yeah.
for some
I agree.
syndicators and operators.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So you're right. So actually, when should an investor or a syndicator or who's trying to sponsor, we call it also, should employ your services? What period of time do they have to do the due diligence? Of course, underwriting, finding the deal, everything, but then due diligence should be complete, or when they should employ
So
you?
always the sooner the better. And particularly at Polymath Legal, our motto is relationships first. And so we want to kind of be involved, even if you're saying, look, and I actually had a client a couple of days ago, they said, hey, we are about to enter into an LOI. So we'll probably be retaining your services in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I said, great.
Yeah.
Now we know that that's coming in the pipeline. So when they call, we'll be ready to get going for them right away. So the sooner the better, even if you just identify the property, just to give a heads up is good because we can
Yes.
start just generally talking about what the general model is, what exemptions might be best, and that sort of thing.
Right.
I often tell clients, I say definitely once you are in towards the end of the due diligence and things are looking good, we should start getting to go
Yeah.
because once that due diligence period has ended, usually it's a fairly short period to when the close happens. And so we've
Right.
got to make sure that we get your documents in place so you can start raising the capital. Now,
Totally.
if you're certain, if you're saying, yeah, we're doing due diligence, but we're going to go for it anyway, or
Mhm.
unless there's something insane,
Yeah.
then let's get it going right away so that we can have your documents ready. And once that due diligence is clear, you can get your offering off and start raising right away.
I totally believe what you're just saying because I've done 34, I think, syndications so far in the last 13, 14 years. And I have 100% closing. What that means is from the LOI up to the end. Because if you do your underwriting really right, and you know that you're going to, look through the numbers, look through the physical due diligence that we do when we walk and look at all that, then those small things we come on the way, we always overcome them. So I totally see what you're talking about, to really go with the gusto when you want to get a deal and the loan is good from the banker, right? Having pre-qualified for the loan and the terms are good, our assumptions are conservative, I call it, and then the exit plan, everything. That's why it's been very easy for, in my case, with my team and I, that we have closed on all 34, 35 deals, and we don't mind getting you involved. And other person I got involved was Lisa Taylor and Jean Trowbridge in my previous things. And all that is so good because then you are not really having the stress and strain, because the biggest thing which stresses a deal does fall through or things happen when the money's not raised, it's not in the bank at the right time, and you start borrowing money and loans and trying to see how can I close, and that's the exciting part. And again, I'm just giving a couple of pointers that my money is in the bank. I've never lost sleep whatsoever. And I, after the PPM is finished and all, and Nick, I'd love to share to the audience also that I give 2% actually interest from my own pocket when my investors wire the money into the LLC account after filling out the proper paperwork up to the day of closing. So their money is sitting in the bank making zero interest rate, and here they transfer the money. My investors love me for that they just have been, I've been using it for 7 8 years, this concept, and it's amazing. I have to pay a few thousands of dollars, and I just add that on as an interest, to them in the first dividend or the cash flow they get, right? So that way. And it's very, very good way to do that. So that's something.
Good.
Tell us a little bit more. I mean, how people can reach you. I mean, I know, we want a lot of people with the market now after COVID,
Mhm.
vaccines are coming out, and I think new blood is going to be flowing through, let's just say, because 2020 was kind of damper year, even though I did 5 syndications or something, with you. And so, yeah, tell us, how people can reach you.
Yeah, you can go to polymathlegal.com.
Mhm.
That's www.polymathlegal.com. Or you can call us at 310-933-5503.
I love that. Love that. We'll put it in the show notes, guys. And also, we might put also the link to the last interview that I did with Nick. And I know you have come and taught in my mastermind also. I really appreciate you. And also, we've been on the Vinney and Bo show. So if you could just Google, Vinney Chopra and Nick Mcgrew, you will come across really gold nuggets that,
Yeah.
Nick has really put together. Any last comments you will say, Nick? Something which can help our investors? Yeah.
It's probably not even the most parting of a comment, but I'd say the one thing that you hit on just a few moments ago about underwriting, when we were talking about what are some other big issues,
Yes.
and you said we know when you have 100% closing because your underwriting is conservative and
Yes.
has some flexibility. And I'd say the underwriting is another big issue that clients run into. Is we hope that everything goes great and perfect, but
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we've underwritten it to where, because unfortunately things don't go great and perfect, as
Mhm.
2020 showed us very, very clearly. And so we want to make sure that we underwrite it to where we hope things will go perfect. But if things don't go perfect, which there are going to be some things that don't, we
Yeah.
want to make sure that our deal can still survive and thrive and grow and be strong. And so I loved when you said you guys underwrite conservatively and you plan and anticipate that, yeah, there's going to be small things that aren't quite right, because that's how the world works. As much as the best laid plans always still have some issues. And so we want to make sure that our underwriting is incorporating those problems or potential issues, because they're going to come in some form, maybe even not the ones that you anticipated.
Sure.
But if you've anticipated that, yeah, not everything's going to be perfect, when those imperfections come, your deal hopefully will still be able to be strong and move forward.
Excellent, excellent. I wanted to also mention, I know you and I are working on a big fund, which is a 506C fund. It's a blind fund because of my track record and everything like that, diversification. Would you say some few things to our, listeners and watchers? What are the pitfalls or good things, pros and cons of having a fund, 506C fund?
Yeah, so at least from the investor standpoint, I'll start with the cons first. Some cons are that you don't particularly know which assets you're buying into. If we're doing a direct syndication, you get the pitch deck. It's looking at one specific property. You can see its history if it's already a performing asset, and you can vet that individual asset. And instead of having to go off of pure assumptions,
Yeah.
can have a lot more concrete data to go off of. Whereas with a blind pool, you don't know what exactly that pool is going to invest into at all. So you're not able to say, oh, I like that asset. Yes, I'm with it. Your
Mhm.
money's in there. And whether you're with it or not, your money is going to be part of that. So that's one con. But I'd say one huge plus is that you get a lot of diversification.
Yeah.
If you're doing a direct syndication, and let's say that you invested into an apartment building that's been doing very bad during COVID,
Mhm.
that investment's going to be bad and you're not going to have returns. Whereas potentially, if you were in a blind pool that maybe invested in that apartment, but also invested in 10 other ones, there might be two or three that are doing bad, but there might be seven that are doing great. And overall, you're still getting a solid return. So it allows for a lot of diversification with very passively without really any work at all on the investor. As you mentioned, though, you have the track record, and that's a lot of what the investors are truly investing in. Is that they're investing in the operators of that blind pool, because they're saying, we think that based upon what they've told us, what their plan is, and hopefully based upon their history, that they're going to be able to make good upon that plan, and we're giving them our funds and we're trusting them to do that. But yeah, I'd say the big con is that you don't get to choose what you're investing into specifically, but the plus is that you're diversified quite a bit. So hopefully your risk in aggregate will be a bit lower.
Thank you. Thank you. Nick, you're always bundle of energy and a lot of great nuggets that you give to our audiences. Thank you so much for taking time to be with me this morning. And hey, guys, if you like the content in this podcast and other podcasts, as you know, in my channel now, we have 4 or 5 podcasts. We are funneling them into the same iTunes, from Vinney and Bo's show, from the Innovative Investing in Senior Living show, my motivational Mr. Smiles motivation. Also, then this one with the Apartment Syndication Made Easy. And all these, if you like the content, please subscribe to it and give us a 5-star rating so that we can rise up, higher in that. I think we hit 60,000 downloads or 70,000 downloads, which is amazing. And, for just a small podcast. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And again, the new books that I'm writing and my teams are writing, the first one, the second one, the third one on senior living investing is coming out. Then another one is coming out, and so on. So thank you so much. And thank you, Nick. Thank you so much.
Be sure to listen to Mr. Smiles next week with more golden nuggets and top-notch coaching tips. You can reach him by going to VinneyChopra.com. Be sure to like, comment, and share to show everyone how Mr. Smiles has brought your apartment syndication business to the next level.